Welcome to the Lab Rat Foiler podcast. My name is Dan, and today we have Steve Tobis with us. Steve, thanks for joining, mate.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
You were one of the original riders that I was looking at online before, because I ordered my Parawing around September, and I think you had two videos on YouTube, part one and part two, that were super helpful. And I was just dissecting that video. I watched it probably 4 or 5 times before I got my Parawing. So thank you for coming on. Probably like 6 or 7 months after those videos now?
Yeah, more or less. I kind of made them like right after BRM dropped their parawings. And that was, yeah, towards the end of the summer last year. So yeah, 6, 7 months or so.
Yeah, so I'm keen to see what happened in those 6 months and get an update from you and where you're at with your parawinging journey. But before we move into that, we really like to touch on a little bit of your history in sports. It helps us understand what's in your tool bag that you're bringing into parawinging. So maybe you start by just telling us your history in sports and what led you into foiling.
Yeah, so I got started really young. I learned to kite when I was 10 in like 2002. So I started with that. Like I was doing windsurfing and kiting when I was a Grom. And I did kind of all aspects of kiting. I was doing freestyle kiting with twin tips, and when that was moving into like wake style and all that, and then you just, I don't know, kind of beat yourself up for so long. And then I got really into wave riding and like trying to push that on the kiting side. And then in like 2016 or 17, I got a hold of my first foil, and it was the slingshot hover glide, I think is what it was called. It was the green one, like
Yep.
this aluminum monstrosity. And I learned to kite foil. I was living in Southern California at that point in time, and that kind of kicked off the whole foiling thing for me. Um, I stuck with kite foiling, well, really, because that was really all there was to do for a while there. And then like surf foiling started to come around, and there was like, the Kai Lenny video that everyone saw that like opened up a whole lot of the surf foiling that we're doing. Uh, so then I was kind of going through that. And then when winging came around, like what, 2019, 2020, I really leaned into that. And then the Parawing dropped, and that was just like a whole new avenue of foiling to go chase. So I've kind of been on this just like endless goose chase of foiling disciplines. And like, I don't know, I try to do everything I possibly can. I'm kind of say I'm an equal opportunity offender. I don't stick in one lane. I'm like all over the place. I'm trying to do 100 different types of foiling at the same time. So yeah, I kind of just, I don't know, I like to do it all. It's too fun to get stuck into one discipline. I don't really have a favorite. And there's one that, I don't like one more than the other. It's just really cool to see kind of how the sports developed, how the gears developed over time, and just
Hmm.
where things are going, just how far it's come in the last, 8 years from, where we started to where foils first started to be kind of commercially available, to how it's like exploded. And now there's like, a professional tour for winging, and like,
Yeah.
there's just so much happening in such a short amount of time. It's just really cool to be a part of.
Yeah, no, I completely resonate with that as well. I every time I see a new discipline in foiling, initially my first reactions weren't great. I was always like, oh, that's just not going to be a thing. And then I think now slowly through foiling teaching me a lesson every time, I'm like, that is something there. So what were your feelings when you saw your first parawing?
Yeah, so the very first time I saw this parawing type concept was like 2 or 3 years ago. Sam, he's the designer with 50 kiteboarding here in Maui, kind of a smaller operation. He's one of the mad scientists that live here in the island. And the very first time I saw that, to me, it didn't really click, to be totally honest, because it was a very early prototype, very early generation. It looked pretty hard to do, and it looked like it took a lot of time and effort and skill to really like grasp the concept. But conceptually, I thought it was awesome. Like seeing Sam be able to get on a wave, stow the thing away, surf the wave, and throw it back out, like that was unreal. It was just we hadn't got there on the gear development side to where it was accessible for most riders.
Hmm.
If you really wanted to put the time and effort in, you absolutely could. But at that point, I was like really into downwinding and really chasing that whole thing with the sup downwinding, and it just didn't really click for me. But I was like, oh, that's cool, yeah, whatever, and downwinding. And then when BRM dropped the Maliko Parawing, you see the video, and it's like boom, instant power. The thing looks super stable. It's like it
Crazy.
was really refined to a point where almost anyone could jump on it and ride it. And
Hmm.
that to me is like what really stuck out to me and like made me want to get on it was just how easy it looked.
Hmm.
And that's kind of a, you know, a fatal error where people who are really good at what they do, they make everything look super easy. So it was kind of, but I went into it, I think, with the right mentality of like, this is a new discipline. Yeah, I've done a lot of different stuff in the past, but this is still totally new. Like I was emotionally prepared to be really bad at this and spend a long time swimming. And that definitely, I think, made my learning curve like a lot more palatable.
Hmm.
That there was a learning curve through it. You know, there wasn't like you just throw it out and you're ripping right away. Like there was some moments and, you know, some challenges to figure everything out, but it was just kind of getting the equipment to come down to a level where most riders could access it and not be limited to kind of this niche, really experienced group that really brought it in to where I wanted to do it.
Yeah, look, I know exactly what you're saying. When I saw the pocket wing as well, I had the same view. I even tried. I got my son's trainer kite, and I went out and I just hold the bridles, and I was like, ah, yeah, it could work. And then it got wet, and then like the session was over, and then never put it back up. And when I saw the BRM, I saw the video. I probably watched it a couple of times. I went to Greg's website and I bought one within 5 minutes. It was like I was like, this. He cracked the code, and it's crazy because it was a 5% difference in improvement in the gear that just made it possible, like you said. And I think you guys are so privileged to have all of these people around you. I mean, how is it like to be in Maui and go to Kaha and just see these guys test new things and experience sports from the beginning, from the inception?
It's really cool. Like if you hang out at any beach here for long enough, you're gonna see some kind of weird stuff. Some of it you look at and you're like, that's stupid. That's never gonna work. But that's where it starts. You know, it starts with this one goofy whack idea that doesn't really work, and then it just kind of gets, you know, refined and distilled into something that's really cool and developed for the masses. So it's cool to see the process. It's fun to see like, you know, you start to know where some of the guys that do a lot of the designing, they try to hide, but like it's still a small island. We only have so many beaches. So you can go find people and see stuff that's happening kind of in the shadows. But yeah, man, it's really cool to just kind of live and be around like the epicenter of the development. Obviously there's, you know, there's parallels happening all over the world, but it
Mm,
seems like a lot of it does come from here in Maui in the wind sports. It's just something that's attracted wind sport athletes for decades. You know, with windsurfing in the 70s and 80s, there was a huge draw, and then a lot of those guys that were, you know, leaders in windsurfing transitioned into kiting and then into winging. You know, they've just been here and they've been developing these products for decades. So, you know, then you get some crazy idea and they go chase it, and we end up with these silly parawings.
and are you guys all close? Like, do you guys all chat between yourselves and share a lot? Or like you said, sometimes, you know, new things might be a little bit more secretive, but once it's out there, like, what's the community like?
Right. Once it's out, then yeah, everything's fair game. You know, once it seems kind of like the unwritten rules. Once you can go buy it, then you
Mm,
know the covers come off and it's fair game for everything. When it's still in prototyping and R&D, that's where like people try to hold their cards close to their chest. Just, you know, if
it's fair.
someone beats you to market, like that's tough because then
Hmm.
they kind of ate some of your lunch. But once you've already released your product, it's out on the market. Like everything's super cool. Everyone's always trying to see what everyone else is doing. You know, it's all this like share but don't share type thing, and it's really interesting to see. But it's, I don't know, it's fun. It's cool to see just kind of where these sports are going and how they're progressing and developing in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, I would love to spend some time there, man, and just get a sense of the vibe. It feels like it's a great place just to be around and soak up all that energy. It's awesome, man.
Totally. Yeah.
What led you to go and live in Maui from living in California?
It's the wind sports, the ocean sports. You know, it's kind of, my dad was a big windsurfer like in the 80s, so you know I kind of grew up around it. But just, I don't know, you know what's here, and then you go travel and live other places, and it's like, all right, yeah, but like, how do I get to Maui? So that's
Yep.
kind of, you know, that's been the thing. Spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do it, and then now finally doing it.
Good stuff, man. And you also do like you also have heaps of videos about tow foiling and towing in general. Like, what is your experience level in towing?
Yeah, I like tow surfing, tow foiling, you know, big wave surfing, water safety, kind of doing all that stuff. It's, I just kind of learned it. You know, I wanted to get into it like my whole life, and you know, it's just expensive, right? Between the
Mm,
equipment, the jet ski, then it's like finding a partner, finding someone you trust, someone that's going to put the time in to pair with you. Because tow foiling is not an individual sport. It's one of the only ocean sports that is a team sport, and you're only as good as the other person, So just trying to find that out, it takes time, and it takes a lot of hours to put that together. And then, I was really lucky to have some opportunities to train with some of the best in the business. A lot of the guys that, they wrote the book for jet ski tow safety.
So
So it
cool.
was, really fun to learn from them and just kind of develop a skill set that's like this weird niche skill set, but
So
opens up
awesome.
a ton of really exciting and fun adventures in the ocean.
No, it's super cool. And I still like, I froth and dream about tow foiling sessions, and it's always so hard to sync up with people with jet skis, and it's like it's a whole day event. It's a different thing, but I think that could help you. Like once you're parawinging and you're in the waves, you have so much more knowledge of what's going on and where to be, and I think that's it's another skill set, like you said, that you're bringing into your tool bag.
Yeah, and there is crossover between it. Like you think, oh, like one's a jet ski and one's a wind powered wing. Like what crossover could you have? But you start to see just like how waves are coming in. You're looking at them
Mm,
differently, and like where you can get the wave and when you need to set up your turn and just establishing your positioning on the wave. It's really not that much different. And
hmm.
in some ways, I think it's kind of better because you have all the control.
Yeah, you
You're
don't
not
gotta rely
relying
on.
on yeah, you're not relying on that communication with your driver, and like, you think that the wave behind is the wave, but they go on the wave in front or vice versa, whatever. Like there's always those, yeah, there's always those like, moments of disconnect that happen, anytime you're doing something with two people. It's just inevitable. But yeah, so there is crossover, but there's also like not, they're different, but just like anything, you can pull a little bit here and a little bit there, and you can kind of, mesh it together into this skill set of reading and writing waves.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I love doing everything as well. It's part of just this podcast, this lab rat kind of experience, an experiment idea. Just try it all. Be a lab rat in the foiling experiment. That's what we try to do and see what happens.
Totally.
So let's get into parawinging, man. Like you were really early in trying sinker boards and going straight into like minimizing your gear and the size of your gear. Sorry, let's just get some basics out there. How much do you weigh and how tall are you?
Yeah, I'm 6'4" and 185 pounds. So I think that's like 80 kilos, 82 kilos, something like that,
Okay,
roughly.
low 80s, yep.
Yeah.
And what are you currently riding?
So I'm riding a custom KT mid length. It's 5'6" by like 18 at like 55 liters. That's kind of all I'm riding for parawinging for a board. I do have a stand up. It's a smaller stand up. I guess not really smaller, but it's like 7'6". And that was what I started on to learn on. And really just my idea with that is with all these sports, taking the board element out of it makes everything easier, right? You have so many things you're trying to deal with and trying to manage a board. Like everything's easier when you have a big stable platform to work from. And so that's where I started. And after a couple sessions, I was like, okay, I figured out how the wing works. I don't really want all this board. Now I want to like start to tap into performance or like
Mm,
move into the intermediate stage. And that's where I started experimenting with a lot of different boards at a whole ranges of designs and volumes and widths.
mm-hmm.
I tried one day going out on my prone board, like what I wing with. It's like a 4.6 32 liter,
Whoa.
like, it's a full on prone board, but that's what I really like to wing with. And I wasn't even close to getting up. Like it was not happening. And that's
Mm,
kind of where I learned with the parawing, like it doesn't develop power like a wing. You need a lot less drag. It's kind of an inertia problem where you need to overcome that resistance to the board being in the water. So that's why I started trying different boards that were like longer, skinnier, a little more volume to stay up,
mm-hmm.
and how I kind of ended up at, in my mid-length size, which I've had a lot of success with, and it's a super fun board. So I kind of feel good about it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like I want to go bigger, but I definitely do not want to go smaller. I know that.
Yeah. So 55 liters. And what was the parawing that you were using when you were trying that full sinker, the 30
That was
odd liter?
yeah, I tried my 3 meter parawing, the 2.8, 2.9, whatever
Two
it is,
nine.
and then I tried a 4. And like it was blowing like, 25, 30 mile an hour. Like it was windy. And I
Wouldn't pick
no
you, like
not
give
even
you
close.
that initial.
No, not even close. So then I went that same day, I took the same setup. I had on like a 90 toe foil because I wanted to ride a toe foil setup. That was like my goal. And Elliot LeBeau had a board down there that was a little bit bigger, and I tried that one, and I was able to get up on that. So that's kind of where that clicked for needing the volume to come up out of the water, and then just kind of reducing the drag overall was really important to getting everything to move.
Yeah. And what foils were you riding when you're trying to? Are you always on the 90 to?
No, so I kind of bounce around a lot. I was riding a lot of the unifoil stuff. The progression 125 was like my go-to foil. Now I've been on the F1, so the Skate 850. I really
Yeah,
like
nice.
that. If it's a little bit weaker in the waves, then I'll throw on like an Eagle X 700,
Hmm.
something with just a little more glide. But if it's surfy, that Skate 850 is like it's unreal. It's been like my go-to foil, and I've had a lot of fun on it.
Yeah, nice. Do you find that like and you still take the bigger Parawings, the four, when you're on those kind of like sinker boards, or are you able to
No,
get? Wow,
I
that's good.
ride basically a 3 meter. That's kind of it. For a few reasons. The four is good. The bigger sizes are just a little less wieldy. There's just
Hmm.
more material.
Hmm.
There's more going on. For some reason, that 3 meter size for here in Maui and just for me, like it's a sweet spot. It's small enough that it's really easy for me to bunch up. It's easy for me to throw around and redeploy. If it gets tangled, there's not a lot to deal with. It was just kind of that right size for our conditions here. Now, obviously, if I live somewhere with less wind, then that calculus totally changes because you need to get going, and if you need a four, if you need a five, whatever that is, like you need to do that.
Mm.
But for here, the three was great. I tried the 1.8 and I felt like I had nothing in it. I was not getting pulled across the water. It seems like lighter people definitely do better with that really small size. But for me, and just like in my weight and the foils and boards I wanted to ride, that 2.9 3 meter size is perfect.
Yeah, and it's a great, like, I think the smaller the parawing, the more fun you're having out there. So definitely,
Totally.
sometimes I even try a smaller parawing and a bigger board. I'll go out on a downwinder board sometimes just to be able to flick a parawing around if I'm doing a session where I'm going to be using it a lot. Um, Yeah, that's awesome, man. And like I'm on a personal journey now to get my next board, and I currently ride a 510 by 18 by 85 liters, so a 1-to-1 weight volume to weight ratio, and I want to downscale. So what makes a good mid-length board for parawinging? Like you said, you tried a few things and a few different shapes. Like what's working for you and what worked for you?
Yeah, so what I've had a lot of success with is early planing. That's been like the critical design component is getting that board to get up and plane with as little effort as possible. Because I found like with the Parawing, it doesn't pump. Like I can't
Mm,
seem to generate the power I can with a wing. With a wing, I don't know, I just feel like I can create a ton of power and I can bridge that gap between not riding and riding really quickly and easily. With the Parawing, I feel like I don't. I feel like it's a lot more sequential of a power delivery. Like I have to shift through the gears more,
yeah.
where I need to be like not moving and then in like second gear and kind of slogging. And then I need to hit third gear where it's starting to plane. Like I can't skip. And so having a board that has the efficiency to where whatever power the Parawing can deliver at that point in time, it needs to maximize it. So things like reducing width I found was huge. Kind of
Hmm.
drawing out the shapes longer and narrower seemed to be a lot more efficient than kind of the short and fat. That being said, like that's not the only way to do it. Obviously, short and wide, there's guys that ride those boards too. But just for me and like the boards that I want to ride, they've definitely been a little bit longer, a little more narrower, and then just retaining the volume that gives me just enough float. Because if
Hmm.
they get too much volume, I find they get too thick, and I just don't like how the board feels in the waves. So it's kind of like trying to do this like balancing act between like five different things and not give up too much, but still try to retain some things. And it's a tricky balance to strike. I feel like a couple more board iterations and it'll just continue to get better.
Yep.
But I'm stoked where I'm at. But definitely like next winter, I'll probably try to do another step in my board design and try something new.
Mm.
Um, but that's kind of again the beautiful thing about being here is there's just so many boards and so many different
Oh,
designers
dude.
and people trying stuff and prototyping. And it's like, do you want to try this? You want to try that? And it's kind of this smorgasbord of gear that you can sample and try. So it's pretty cool to just see what everyone's doing. There's a lot of
Hmm.
different approaches, and I think there's there's not one right answer. There's a lot of different ways to end at the same result, and whatever works for you and your conditions and your riding style that's the best way to go.
Yeah. What bottom shape of a board promotes that early planing? Is it just a flatter shape, or what?
So
I'm asking that because I'm like, I feel like there's an opportunity to get some of those flatter shapes onto a mid-length board, and then you see some boards out there right now that are kind of going with that approach. And but then the touchdowns, you compromise when you're touching down on the water. So like, what is it that makes a good bottom shape for that early planing?
Right. I think if you're only designing around early planing, it's low rockers and flat bottoms. Those, just look at like a flat bottom boat. They're basically always planing. Um, that does come at the cost, though. Like you said, if you touch down, that's a lot of surface area that's going to want to stick. And then
Mm,
how your rails are shaped and how the water flows up and over onto the deck, like that's a huge amount of drag and reduced flow that you have when you have water coming over your deck. So there's, I think, going full on into like flat bottoms is probably a little too extreme. But then if you have this like super rockered with a bunch of contour and stuff on the bottom, then a lot of times there's drag for when they're trying to plane.
yeah.
So it's kind of finding the difference, and you can compensate a lot with length and
Hmm.
waterline, and I think that's been a big help. But then you get too long and it's like not super fun to ride, because I still want, like, the feeling I'm going after is that super surfy, like sitting in the pocket, really, trough the lip surfing.
Mm,
That's like what I want out of it.
yeah.
So you have to give up a little. You can't take a 8 foot board and surf, vertically in 3 foot waves. Like, it just, you start running into some people can, I can't, so shrinking that board down, having something that's just a little more maneuverable has been, the feeling that I'm chasing. And that's just kind of what I want. There's other people that they want, something that's going to be a little more cruisy and a little more
Hmm.
glidey. And that's where they're going with longer boards, into 7 feet or so. Um, but I pay for that, where if it gets light, a lot of times I'm drifting for a while, or I'm like stuffing the parawing in my shirt and prone paddling and chipping in and then throwing the wing out.
Oh,
Like,
look at
you're kind of
interesting.
like forced, yeah, you're kind of forced to adapt. So
Yeah.
it's definitely like, to get that surf feeling, I pay dues to get there. It doesn't come free.
That's
So there's
so cool,
pros and
dude.
cons.
I love that, like chipping in and then deploying. And I have some crazy ideas about doing some stuff on like an 11-liter board that I have, and just having someone tow me up and then just be riding an 11-liter board, like a kite foil board, with the Parawing. It will happen one day. I just need to find, a twin tipper out there that's willing to tug me up, and then I'll be all right.
There you go.
Yeah. Um, what about the volume distribution? Where do you feel is it an even volume distribution that you think works for parawinging, or a little bit more nose?
I think a little more nose, just to help that nose kind of stay up out of the water. But if they get too much volume in the nose, then it like bogs, the tail bogs. So kind of, I think just sitting, a little bit nose high is ideal. My board's probably like, roughly balanced, just maybe 55-60% in the nose, because you also want tail lift. If you don't have enough in the tail of the board, as soon as you stand up, that board's just going to kind of sit and bog, and it's not going to want to lift that tail up. So finding the right tail shape and the right amount of volume throughout the board is super important.
Yeah, it's so much to think about. Do you have inserts on your board, or it's a strictly
Yep.
strapless? You do.
No, I threw inserts in it, and I've tried some strap parawinging,
I was
tried
gonna
some
ask.
backflips with it.
Yep.
My neck was sore the next day, and I kind of hung that one up. But no, it's totally doable. It's totally a thing. There's, Balls Mueller over in Europe. He's doing some strap stuff. The day after I posted a video trying backflips, Kai Lenny goes out and throws like insane backflips, is
Just this
riding out and just
perfect
like
one.
makes it,
Yeah.
yeah, it just makes it look unreal. And it's like, all right, well, there's the bar and I'm good. So, it's all kind of risk reward and what you want to do and put your body through. And like, for me, I'd rather go ride waves and try to ride, 8 consecutive days, and not like spend one day freestyling and then 4 days with ibuprofen and a foam roller.
Yeah, I'm still really interested in putting some straps on, and even just riding a wave powered on the Parawing and doing some slides. Like, there's so much to explore.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think it's worth doing. Like, strap inserts, they really don't add much to a board, like as far as weight. And
Mm.
like if you use them, great. If you don't, like so what? They're not heavy. It's pretty easy to do. So and it just gives you a whole nother option of riding to kind of chase.
And how well like, can you break down that sinker start that you kind of probably perfected by now? Like what is your technique to getting up on a sinker board?
So right now, that's a really good question. I don't really have a technique. It's a lot of flopping and flailing and trying to balance until I magically get a gust and then we go. On the full sinker board, I do it just like winging, where I just sink the board and put my feet on top and go. Now with my mid length, like when I wing, I still sinker start it that way. Like I'm
Hmm.
standing on the deck of the board and then I grab the wing and go. But with the parawing, just kind of the way it works, I can't do that. So what I do is I start on my knees. I gotta think about it a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, I start on my knees. I'm holding the nose of my board, and then the parawings in one hand. And then once it starts to pull and I get moving, then I have both hands on the parawing, and then I go from my knees to my feet, and then try to pump the board and get up.
And that pumping action, it's a very, I feel it's a different pumping action than when you're sup paddling, for example, where you go and you go through those phases, like you said, 10 to 20%, 20 to 40. And I feel it's almost sometimes more like a dock start where you start forcing a pump and then you engage the foil. This is if you have wind. If you don't have wind, I think it's very much like you go slow and you pick up speed slowly. But tell us a little bit about that initial pumping action to engage the foil.
Yeah, so I'm usually trying to be a little more gentle on the foil because I don't want to push through it. Because if I push through it, then your board hits and then you kill all your momentum that you have. So I try to just do a little more gentle pumps. And really, I'm just trying to build speed because usually, like the first 3 or 4 pumps, I'm not actually fully up on foil. It's kind of that like you're more hopping. And I'm trying to like just maximize the amount of time that I'm up on foil in between hops
Hmm.
because that's really where I find I'm building that last 20% of speed that I need to get riding. So I'm not so much trying to push on the foil as much as I'm almost trying to jump off of it and unweight the board and get the foil to carry, 3 feet and then 6 feet and then 10 feet. And then at that point, I've retained enough of that speed where I'm off and going. So it's more about trying to unweight everything and less about trying to push through it.
It's so cool because I think it's so sensitive and you become so in tune with what's happening. And when you say, oh, it's a delicate pump, there's a delicate pump and there's a forceful pump. And we get really, I don't know, sensitive to those things. And that's where I think people that don't practice other disciplines, they might take a little bit longer because they haven't experienced like trying to pump out of a bad situation, downwinding, for example, or doing a 2 for 1 and just pumping out and going against the wind and things like that would help you get that sensitivity and learn that sensitivity. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, you pull a little bit from all the different sports you do. It's not like saying, if you never kite, you can never wing. Like that's just not true.
Mm.
But there's little things and just little techniques and balance tips and feelings and sensations that you'll recall or be able to pull from, and you can kind of put them together, and it just makes learning future sports, I think, just a little bit. It accelerates your learning curve. Where
100%.
if someone who's never done it, maybe it takes them a month to learn,
Hmm.
and someone who's done a lot, it might take them 3 days. But yeah, it's all just pulling little feelings and feedbacks and tips and tricks, and you kind of just piece it together, and then you end up writing.
Yeah, and that's why Kai, sends a backflip in his first session. He's done backflips
Yeah,
on everything. So he's like,
exactly.
oh yeah, I can throw this around.
Easy.
What did you yeah, super easy. What did you bring from kite foiling? I love to talk to people who kite foil because there's so many things that we can start doing with parawinging that relate to kite foiling riding. What kind of ability did you tap on when you
I
started
think a lot
parawinging?
of it, it's just the foil discipline at those speeds. Because kite foiling is inherently a faster discipline, right? Like obviously it's not, there's people racing, winging and whatnot, but for sake of conversation, generally I find that I'm moving faster when I'm kite foiling because
Hmm.
just the way that everything works, the size of foils you're riding, how the kite pulls you, like I'm moving faster. So you learn how to deal with speed and how to maneuver at speed, and then kind of how to maintain your momentum as you're
Hmm.
trying to do different tricks and stuff. And I think that's the biggest thing. I don't really feel like I gained a lot of, well, I guess one thing I did in the very first few sessions of the Parawing before we had the bridle adjustment that came out, I was having a problem with holding down my power. Like I was just always way overpowered, and it was just I was getting blown up. And it took me a minute to figure it out, but I started being more proactive on my foil with how I was edging, and kind of like back to the 2 line kite days, or like the fixed 4 lines when you couldn't sheet and you had
Yep.
to watch the water and see the gust and really set your edge before the gust hit. Then like that, it took me a little bit, but that came back to me, and then I started
Mm.
doing that again, and like finding the gust and like being way loaded up on my edge before the gust hit to drive that wing to the front of the window. Stuff like that is were kind of some things that I brought over. But those, I think those are just like minor nuance things at like, and like the gear development I feel has already moved beyond needing those techniques.
Mm.
Like the first session, the first iteration, we were on 2 line kites, with
100%.
it was full power, just hold on and pray. Now, Greg put out the bridle modification that gave a little more sheeting, and then there's new designs from Ensis and Flow and Ozone, and like they all kind of just are building on each other. And as riders, we're just gaining advantage here with better gear. And now there's, without leaking too much, I guess there is a new Maliko that Greg's working on,
Hmm.
and you see that wing, and it's just another step beyond. So it's this evolution of gear getting better and better, where you don't need those skills and experiences. Now you can kind of get away with, like kiting, when we had the bow kites and you could just sheet out and the kite depowered. That was
That was a
huge for people
crazy
learning. And
evolution.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was this massive design leap, and we're not there yet, but we're getting there. We're like at the chicken loop phase. We have some sheeting, we
Yeah.
have some control.
A lot of people ask me about that. Like, will we ever have something that resembles a chicken loop in the B lines and, be able to sheet out, sheet in? I'm not sure. It's I think there's something about what Greg did and that is so minimal. And it's so like there's no pulleys, there's nothing like you see other brands exploring with pulley systems and all that. And I think it's really cool. I think you might get a little bit more wind range or whatever, but it starts to get complicated. It's so much harder to design something that's simple rather than designing something with all these bells and whistles that does everything. I really admire that simplicity. So I can't wait for a V2 of the BRM to see where he's going to take it, because I also feel that the Parawings will start to become a little bit different. Like you guys are riding waves, and the stowability and the packability is probably one of the biggest things in going upwind. Like you need those features in the Parawing so you can just pack it away quickly, ride the wave. So, which Parawings have you ridden so far?
So I've rode the BRM, Insys, and the Flow wings, and I've tried a couple prototypes from some other brands, but the ones in my garage are those three right now:
Yeah.
the BRM, the Insys, and the Flow.
And a lot of people, and this is not a comparison, but what do you feel that each of them have that is like their strength?
Totally. So I think the BRM has simplicity. It's one metric that I've been interested in, and it seems to be kind of hard to get, is how many meters of lines are in each set of bridles.
Mm.
Because when you put them all next to each other, it doesn't look like, you look at like the Ensis looks like it has the most, and then the Flow is kind of in the middle, and the BRM looks like the least.
Hmm.
But that's just kind of how it looks. That might not be the true amount of the true, linear feet of lines that each one has.
Hmm.
So I think that's an interesting comparison metric that I'd more just be curious to know. But the BRM definitely seems to take the cake for simplicity. Like it's just a really simple design. There's not a lot to it, for better or for worse, but it's just kind of there. It works. It packs down super small. And so like for wave riding, pack down size is a really important feature to me. Like being able to ball it up into something the size of, a cantaloupe is really nice versus a watermelon. Like that's just, it seems minor, but when you're on the wave and you're trying to focus on riding a wave, having a smaller sail size or a smaller pack down size matters. Um, with the Ensys, they have like a sheeting system in the middle line,
Hmm.
which it's more of, I think, like a safety depower and less of a sheeting, where you could clip to it if you wanted to and then let go, and now you're on a leash and it's totally flagged out. But so if that's something that, is important to you or you want, then that's kind of the only one right now offering that type of
Yeah.
safety system. The Ensys and Flow, they have a heavier sail material than the BRM. So who knows for durability? I've put a ton of hours on my BRM and it's still fine. My 3 meter after a while starts to get a little bagged out compared to my 4, which is still crispy,
Mm.
but it's not bad. So I think, with these heavier materials, they don't pack down as small, but they might last a little longer or deal with abrasion better.
Yep.
And then the flow, what I really noticed with that one is it just pulls like a truck. Like the low end on it is insane. It I found that I couldn't quite point as high upwind as I could. The Ensis I could shoot way upwind
Hmm.
because I think it's just a little higher aspect design and pushes to the front of the window.
Hmm.
But with that, I feel like I gave up some of the low end out of it. So like my wind range for that wing is pushed a little bit higher than compared to like the flow or the BRM.
Yep.
So it's really interesting to see kind of, you just put all these 3 different designs back to back to back, and there's similarities, but there's also differences. And those differences are not that dramatic. Like the Ensis is probably the most different with like an extra set of lines and the sheeting thing in the middle,
Hmm.
but it's still like not anything crazy. It's still single skin design. They still have like this loop plastic thing for the leading edge shape. So, it's just really cool to see the small iterations, but that eventually there's going to be some bigger steps coming along the way.
Yeah, there's yeah, like you said, I think there's a lot of design that will still evolve, but then the materials, I feel like the advantage of the BRM, which I really think is smart, like if you're doing a first iteration of a Parawing, in 6 months' time, that's going to be obsolete. So you're not really looking for longevity anyway, and that gives you time as a brand to search for other options that might be a little bit more durable with the same packability. And I feel like the brands kind of overkilled a little bit on that longevity. I feel like I don't use the Parawing all the time. Like it's not like a kite that you're riding and it's flying for 100% of the session. A Parawing flies for, like, if you're riding waves, it might fly for maybe 60, 70% of the session and you ride waves for 30%. But if you're doing a downwinder, it's the opposite. It's up for 20%, 10%, and then you're
If
doing a
that, yeah,
downwinder. You don't even, if that, right? So
right.
depending on your use, I feel like there's a huge opportunity for the brands to say, look, this is a downwinding Parawing. This is like a 24-gram material, which is super light. It's not for you to, mow the lawn or something like that, but it will give you incredible packability, super fast, super quick. And then you have another type of Parawing that might be for someone who needs a little bit more resistance in wave riding. Like if you get yarded, you probably need a little bit of, you would know, a little bit of resistance in your Parawing. So then maybe you need, some better stitching or whatever, reinforced stitching. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on like those different avenues that Parawing will start to converge to now?
It makes sense. Look at every iteration of wind sport. You've had windsurfing, you have wave sails, you have slalom sails, you have freestyle, then you go into kiting, you have sea kites, bow kites. Like there's just different designs for winging. You have, the boom freestyle handles, you have soft handles, you have different
Mm-hmm.
designs that built and with different discipline intent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just inevitable that the Parawing is going to go that route. The first iterations of kites we had 2 lines, 3 struts, and they were 5 meters, and you could have red or black.
Yeah.
I feel like that's
Lou
kind of where
Wayman was
we are.
still doing S-bends on it, so it's
Hey,
doable.
right, right, totally. And I think that we've been there with the Parawing, and now we're progressing into probably some more disciplined design intents. I think there is still something to be said for just kind of casting a wide net. Having a does everything approach. I don't know what the market looks like for disciplined choices, but it seems like it's just kind of an inevitability. I don't think there's been any wind sport that's stuck in a single lane as it's developed over time. Maybe at the beginning it did, but they've all seemed to branch out. And I think it's inevitable that we'll see those designs. Ultra lightweight, call it like low durability designs for downwinding, that it gets you up and then you put it away and it's the size of a baseball. Or you have something that's built for wave riding that is a little more durable and has the heavier stitching and can get drugged through the water and not blow up. Like I think it's inevitable, and it's going to be cool to see how these designs evolve and the production shakes out over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it will. And I think it's so early still. I mean, we're in a niche sport, right? And we're talking about within a niche, talking about a secondary niche. So like, what is the market for it? Like you mentioned, probably tiny. There would probably be like 100
Yeah.
people that would buy it, if that, and that was it. Um, but yeah, like I do feel that this year will be massive for parawinging. Like, God, I can see now summer coming up and everybody wanting to try the parawing, and let's see where we are by the end of this year. I feel like a lot of the wingers will have one parawing in their quiver at least by the end of the year. You know, a good
Totally.
percentage of that.
And like here in Maui through the summer, that's our downwind season. Our North Shore is pretty much flat, but Maliko just fires.
Yeah.
And already we've seen more people going downwinding with their parawings. Like
Mm,
last year, there was a handful of people, only a couple. Now there's been like a car full of just parawingers doing their own downwind thing.
so
So
cool.
it's opening up the sport to people that either don't want to or are unable to put in the time and physical effort it takes to learn to paddle downwind. And it just kind of opens up the sport for them now with the parawing
Hmm.
into a lot more accessible and like user friendly sport. Because ask anyone, like downwind sup paddling,
Oh
it
my God.
sucks to learn. It is without a doubt, like I'll die on this hill, the hardest ocean sport to learn,
Yep.
without a doubt. And then to be able to do it at a point where you're having fun and you're enjoying it, that takes so much time. Not to just be able to complete a run, but to get
Yeah.
to the bottom and be like, yeah, that was
Survive.
fun. Like I
Yeah.
enjoyed that. That takes so long and
It
it's so
does.
hard. So I think with the parawing, it eliminates 90% of that. Like, yeah, you still got to learn how to ride downwind, but it just opens it up. And I think it's only going to be better for downwinding and just the development of the sport and getting people to do something that they probably wouldn't want to do otherwise.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the wingers who there's a few things that people who wing they kind of carry and hold on to very strongly. One, the ability to go out and have a session. So they don't want to do the shuttles. They're like, oh, I don't want to do all this thing. It sounds so hard. Well, the parawing eliminates that because you do your own upwind and downwind, and you get rid of that. But also, like you said, learning to paddle, man, I went through hell. It took me so long, and I think, excuse me, what was hard about it was it took me a long time to get to a level where I was comfortable enough to start like risking a little bit because I didn't want to fall. I just wanted to ace every run, and my mindset was like get to point A to point B without falling. And once you do that a couple of times, I was like, God, I mean, I want to start exploring. And then, after 10 paddle ups, your 11th paddle up it won't be great. You're going to start getting sloppy with your technique and you're tired. And then the parawing allowed me to just go on a downwind run and just hammer it. Not care if I fall. I don't care. Like I get up as easy as you get up on a wing. And then my evolution in turns just went bananas. So do you feel that wingers will benefit from this? Like who do you feel will like just look at the parawing as that option of, well, maybe this is how I start downwinding?
I think anyone that wants to downwind, like even
Mm,
for sub paddlers, like I've been downwind paddling for a few years now, and like when I got the parawing, that's all I was doing for like 2 or 3 weeks. All my downwinders were on the parawing, and it was just so cool because kind of your point, it opened up a new line that I was taking through the ocean. Like I'd never cruise the shoreline all the way down the North Shore of Maui. Like we're always way off in the deep blue bumps. And then one day we had like a little 2 to 3 foot north swell, and I was like, I'm gonna hug the coastline, and I literally did like a tour de Maui. I hit every
so
single
cool.
surf spot between Maliko and the harbor.
Oh my,
And I was like never more than like 300-400 yards offshore. I was like in the breaks, and then there's a shallow spot of reef, so you go out and around it. And like it was really fun because I got to like sample all these epic surf spots, still do a downwinder, and like I didn't have that concern of falling
hmm,
because if with the downwind setup, like if you fall in head high waves, like that's kind of a lot to manage with a 9 foot board and a downwind race foil. Like it's just not the right conditions to have that equipment in. But here I'm on a surf setup with a surfboard and like or surf foil board, and I'm where I want to be in those waves with this. So that was really cool to see, or really cool to do. It was just a different avenue to approach kind of the Maliko to the harbor shuttle. But then, yeah, people that have wind sport experience and they want to get into it, but they don't want to invest in subfoiling financially or physically or whatever. The parawing gives them that option, and it lets them draw from, because like paddle downwinding, it's a paddle sport. It's not really a wind sport.
Mm-hmm.
Where your background, if you have a strong paddling background, you're going to translate better than someone with a strong wing foiling background. And the parawing will kind of align better with someone with a wing foiling background because you're
Mm-hmm.
still more doing a wind sport. You still got to learn how to read the bumps and all that. But like, as far as just getting on foil and going, which is like 80% of the battle, the parawing will bridge that gap a lot better for someone with that wind sport background.
And how do you feel that the parawing kind of forced you to become a better downwind foiler? Because we don't have a paddle. I, would be able to get out of any hole with a little paddle pump and things like that, and you can't do that with the parawing. Do you feel that you started to, perform better on a downwind run and using turns a little more?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, like when I downwind sup paddle, I never use my paddle. So then like I don't paddle pump. I think a lot of that is because I like to use a really short paddle for my height. Like my paddle's like around my eyebrows. So for me to paddle pump with that, I'm like really reaching down and it just I'm not in a good like biomechanic setup it with that, like it just I don't get power from that. I do better if I just use my legs and just push on the foil. So I really didn't feel like I was losing anything switching to the parawing. And if anything, I felt like it was actually easier because I had both my hands free. And that was a really weird
It's
feeling.
cool,
Like
isn't
you
it?
don't think that holding a paddle is a big deal because you're like, okay, this thing weighs, 2 pounds, whatever. It's like minor. But then as soon as you put that parawing away and it's, in the little fanny pack and you flip it around on your back and now you're just standing there, you're like doing the Ricky Bobby, like, I don't know what to do with my hands, it was just like, it was such a trip. And like, to be able to send a prone downwinder here in Maui, like you got to be a
Oh,
pretty gnarly athlete. Like just the chip in is really intense. There's no breaks as you go down. If you fall, you're just swimming,
you're
you're kind of
done.
just screwed. So to be able to experience that and not have that risk exposure and like for a regular downwind foiler to be able to go do that was a really cool feeling. So I would say it kind of just felt different. I
Hmm.
don't think it necessarily helped, but it also didn't hurt. It was just a new feeling, and it was really fun to just kind of experience that.
Yeah, I think that's really good discipline for anyone who's using the paddle to not use the paddle. And if you're gonna come down and force yourself into a hole that you're like, I'm gonna get out of this either by reading the bumps better or just pumping your way out of it, because you get into bad habits out there and you're always doing a little pump paddle. And then like when you don't even think about it, and then you're like, God, I have to put this paddle away because it's not what you want to be doing?
Yeah, I think I think I have opportunity to use my paddle more. Like, I think it'll help me out in the long run, but I think it also goes the other way where you can kind of rely on it as a bit of a crutch, where if you learn, like, why did I get myself in this hole and what bump selection choices did I make to get me into this position to kind of be ahead of that, I
Hmm.
think you end up paying out better on the back end. But then being able to bring the paddle in, I think it is still adding energy, right? You're still imparting energy on the water, so you're going to move faster. I think just being selective with it and like using it at the right times is critical to kind of optimizing in that standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I really want to touch on wave riding with you because you have a lot of experience tow foiling and just towing in general. And what are some good tips for people getting into parawinging for wave riding?
Yeah. Um, so the biggest thing that I figured out was set up on the wave early. So like don't try to make your turn as the wave is standing up and that lift's coming over. Try to get on where you think you need to be, go another 50 yards out and
Mm,
try to turn on the wave there. And the reason for that is it takes time to pack up the parawing and set up for your wave. And if you start your turn in the good part of the wave, now you've been messing around with the parawing and you've totally blown the good part of your wave, and now you have kind of the leftover crumble on the inside that like no one wants to ride that anyways. So if whatever the good section is, and some waves are mega long and it doesn't matter, and like that's not what this is about. If you have a section where there's a defined good part of the wave and it's from A to B, and that's where you want to be, make sure that you're turned around, the wing is packed down, and you're set up and ready to ride the wave by the time it starts to get there.
that's a
So
great
that's
tip.
like the biggest thing it took me to figure out, because I was blowing all these really good waves and I just couldn't get the feeling that I wanted. And I figured out it was just because I was too late. I was, packing down the parawing, just flying down the line when I'm like wanting to turn. So I started setting up earlier. There is, its own skill set with that where the wave is moving so fast it hasn't really hit the reef and slowed down yet. So like finding your timing, that just takes time. It just takes practice. You're going to blow 30 waves before you get a good one, but eventually you'll figure out what that timing needs to be like, and then you'll start to dial it, and then you're getting really good surfing waves in the optimal section.
I like
The
that.
other thing,
That's really
the
good.
other thing that really helped me out was when I'm stowing the parawing is to turn downwind and
Hmm.
face in, like go with the parawing, and that helps it collapse, and you don't get cells of air or like pockets that are inflated. And what I found, I'm a goofy footer, so in Maui, I'm trying to go left a lot of times, and that's into the wind.
Hmm.
And if you're going into the wind, if you have the smallest pocket, it catches wind and it just slows you way down. It's like a drag chute at that point, or it reinflates and pulls you backwards, and like you're in the wave, then you get pounded, and it's super unfun. So I found that when I set up, if I just drift off downwind a little bit as that wing is coming down and I'm stowing it, it's much easier to deal with it. And I get everything all packed up and situated, and then I turn left into the wind to get on my wave.
Hmm.
If you're going right or you're riding your wave with the wind, then that's less of a thing because you're going that way anyways. But if you're riding a wave where you're pointing into the wind, definitely like just bearing off a little bit to get everything packed and sorted is really important to getting a good wave ride.
And you're not completely stowing. You're just wadding while you're riding the waves these days.
Yeah, so when I ride waves, I don't use the belt because the amount of time it takes me to get everything packed away in the belt and then like sorted is just too long. Like the
Hmm.
wave, you think maybe on a really good wave, I have 30, 35 seconds on the wave. I can't get everything sorted, tucked away in the belt, ride the wave, and then get it back out in that amount of time where I'm enjoying the wave. So really, I just pack it up, I hold it in my hand, and I ride the wave. So where it's all just held in my hand, and that way it's already out. It's easy and quick to redeploy, and I just get it. The whole thing, I'm trying to enjoy the meat of the wave, and then do everything else on the beginning and backside of it.
Yeah. And I sometimes I don't even care. So like I obviously I want to try to redeploy and get up and going if I can, but sometimes I just if the wave's that good, I really don't care how I bunch it up. I can just stop and just ride out of the wave, stop and just do another water start and get going. And you want to get into the flow of just doing a session and having those runs without touching down. But to be honest, I'll sacrifice going back out to hitting a wave the way it should be hit, you know?
Totally, totally. And like I'm very guilty of that. If there's a really good section and it's like I know I'm going on the inside where the wind's a little squirrely and light, I'm probably not going to get it going. I still send the wave and like it's fine. If if the wave kind of fizzles out and I know like I want to get back out or I'm like in between sets and I know that I don't have time to mess around with a restart
Mm.
and I like need to stay up to be able to get back out before the next set, then that's where like I'm really more focused on the redeploy. But otherwise, yeah, like it's just ride the wave. That's what we're here to do, and we'll figure out the rest later.
100%. But in saying that, like, what have you found helps to be able to redeploy properly? Like, and you're using the BRM, which doesn't have any color coding as well. And how do you wad it up, and how do you hold it in your hand? And I know this. Sometimes we don't even think about it, but like people starting out, they always ask, like, how do you hold the thing? Where do I put the lines? And what's your technique for
Totally.
that?
The old saying, better be lucky than good. I kind of live by that. So it's, yeah, the stowing and redeploy for wave riding, I think is the hardest part
Mm.
because you're trying to make this bundle of lines and fabric and then have it sort itself back out with a puff of wind. Like that's,
It's a
when
tall
you say it
ask,
like
isn't
that,
it?
like that,
Yeah.
that's a lot to ask. Um, there are some tricks though that I think help your chances of a redeploy happen. I'm I never am 100% on them. Like when I
Mm-hmm.
first started, I would maybe get like 15 or 20% of my redeploys. And
Mm-hmm.
then after, a month of practice, now I'm like probably like 70, 80%. So there are things you can do. I stall off the back lines.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, when I'm coming in, I hold the back lines, I grab everything at the bar and then slide it all the way up to the sail. And then I like doing it in my hand as I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
through it. I get my wing like the canopy sorted in my hand first, and then I just bring the bar to my other hand. So now I'm just making a big loop with the
Hmm.
lines and the bar, and it's all held in one hand. And then I'm riding basically with this loop hanging down on my downwind hand. So I have the canopy and the bar all in my downwind hand, and there's just a loop of lines. There, I'm just riding my wave, letting it do its thing. I'm trying to not let the bar like pass through lines or whatever.
Hmm.
And then when I go to redeploy, something that helped me out a lot, and I got this from Scott Drexler watching him ride, is I don't throw the wing, just kind of drop it, and then I let it slowly reinflate or like
Hmm.
recatch air. And then I can see if I have a cross or the bars fed through. I don't have a fully powered wing. I have, a 40% powered wing. So
Hmm.
then I can grab it and feed it through real quick if it's a small adjustment, and then let the wing will power up. And I can do that like while I'm on foil. If I have a bigger tangle or there's more going on, it's kind of just messed up, then like I usually end up stopping and fixing and restarting. But a lot of the minor tangles where it's just like one pass through the lines, that's pretty easy to sort out while you're still on foil.
Hmm.
And a lot of that is just not letting the sail fully power when I'm trying to deal with it. Because once that thing's powered up, it's hard to reel it back in. And like you don't want to feed your hands through the lines and then they like get caught, and it's kind of a spooky feeling when you're locked the
Hmm.
hand, their fingers get wrapped in line.
Yep.
So having it like partially powered and like kind of sitting on your board almost or like by your feet seems to have been that doing that like increased my make rate, whatever you want to call it, like pretty
Yep.
substantially.
I think that, dude, that is like a golden tip. If anybody takes anything out of this podcast, just listen to that, because I would throw it in the beginning, and the other thing is when you do deploy it and it's fully powered within a second, it gives you a bit of a jolt, and sometimes you're able to hold on to it. Sometimes it can, throw you off balance. But I do the same. I just hold it down, and you see sometimes it even unspins itself, and then it redeploys. It wants to fly properly, and once there's a little twist in the lines, sometimes you can even ride out of it, and it tries to sort itself out.
You definitely don't get that like death loop that it does when it's fully powered and you have
Hmm.
a twist or a rotation. I find that when that thing powers up, if those lines are twisted, it just wants to keep going and going, and like I can't get it undone. But when there's no power in it, it'll just like self unwind, or you can twist the bar, and it's
Mm,
just a lot easier to manage when there's less power in the sail.
that's such a good tip, man. And another thing that for me sometimes is really hard is to navigate white water in the surf. And what are your tips for that? How do you ride the foil in white water?
Yeah, that's hard because you're going from this super solid, clean water to air, and there's pockets, and it's blowing up, and it's like little landmines throwing your foil everywhere. Um, the best tips I can give is ride fast and ride flat. And kind of what I mean through that is like attack the whitewater. Don't slow down and let the whitewater come to you. Like try to punch through the whitewater, like be the hammer, not the nail.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is ride your foil really flat. And what happens if you're on edge like this and you get, a pocket of air down here, it can drop your foil out where
Mm.
you're not leveraging that full flat, projected area. You're leaned over.
Mm-hmm.
When you go through whitewater, you're going to lose lift. Like that's just what's going to happen. So when your foil's super flat, it's just going to work better. And then also like really stepping in with your back foot to get that steep angle of attack to try to leverage the low end of the foil
Mm-hmm.
is what's going to matter. Some foils do better than others. I personally have a harder time dealing with whitewater on bigger foils because I just can't seem to move as fast through the water. So
Interesting.
when I have little smaller foils, I just feel like I'm less impacted by the variation and turbulence happening in the whitewater. And then ultimately, it's just practice. Just there's only one way to figure it out, and that's by doing it. But really, I think the biggest thing is just ride fast and get through that crappy water and into the good water as quickly as possible.
Do you find a difference between like lower aspect foils and higher aspect foils as well?
Yeah, I think the lower aspect handle the whitewater much better. The high aspect foils, I don't know, I feel like they kind of have a little less low end, so they want to drop out a little more. And when you hit that aerated water, they just don't seem to hold and support as well as the lower aspect foils. So that's kind of where like when I'm in waves, I really like the more surf foils, like the Skate compared to the Eagle X, because it just lets me do a lot more in the whitewater. Um, but if it's not like a good surf foil wave, then you kind of just deal with it. And you can adjust your timing too, to where you're not really dealing with like big whitewater and like the
Yeah.
set waves. Try to go out in between sets where it's smaller and more manageable. But it's kind of one of those, there's no magic to it, but I think just hit it fast and hit it flat, and
Hmm.
you'll punch through a lot easier.
What size mast do you normally use when you're wave foiling? Wave riding.
Yeah, usually like an 85 mast, 80, 85. With the longer masts, it's kind of there's a pro and a con, right? The longer masts, you have to ride higher for the foil to be efficient, but you get more freedom to deal with, before your foil's popping out. Uh, with the longer masts, you can kind of get under some of the whitewater a little bit. I feel like it
Yeah.
maybe is a little easier. But the flip side, like, it's hard to punch the foil out on an 85 mast,
Hmm.
like where it breaches. Or with the 75 mast, even if a wave's coming in and it's like the lift's coming through and you're trying to go like this,
Yeah.
with a 75 mast, it's really easy to launch out the back. Where with
Hmm.
the 85, I feel like it's easier to kind of stay in the water. So usually I'm riding the 85, but also like tide dependent. If we get
Yeah.
a really low tide and there's only 2 feet of water on the reef, like that, it doesn't work. So
Mm.
then I'll go with a little shorter mast.
Nice. Are those the two that you normally use, 85 and 75?
Yep, 75, 85. I used to ride an 80. Like when I was on unifoil, I had the progression 800 mass. And like that length is good too. I just more when I was buying mass, I didn't want to have like too tight of a increment between
Yeah.
them. And like 85 is for me, that's kind of a really good catch-all size. Like that's what I want for towing, for winging, for generally for parawing. Like it just covers more bases. Where like towing with an 80 mass, like in bigger waves, it gets a little dicey just because
Hmm.
it's shorter. Um, so really, like my choices are more off of getting the most diversity out of my mass and less about what's optimal for that day.
Hmm. Hmm.
But if you want to buy every mass in the book, then like, yeah, you'll find the ideal mass. But like, I'm not trying to spend $8,000 on mass.
I know. It's so hard. I just ride an 80. That's all I have, just because of what
Yeah,
you said. It's just, the one dude. Even kiting, man. I'm kiting with 80, and I'm kind of having fun because it pops out of the water pretty quick for, to jump. And if I'm on a kite, I'm jumping, man. That's why I love the
yeah,
kite. I love to do just a boost and stuff
totally.
like that. What was like your gnarliest session out there in the Parawing, downwinding, surf, anything that you can recall that you were like, all right, that was a little bit too much.
I don't know. I think not so much a gnarly session, but more of like a gnarlier time. It's just learning how to efficiently ride waves. And like I didn't really have the smartest approach to it. Like I just tried to sail out the back and ride the biggest ones I could find and
That's what we
pray
all
that it all
do.
worked
Come
out.
on, Steve.
Yeah,
Just
so
get the
like
biggest one.
yeah, had I been like a little bit smarter, I probably would have just sat like on the inside and did that. But I figured why not just jump in off the deep end. And like there was a couple sessions where like you go down and you get cleaned up and you get separated from your parawing, and I kind of
Mm.
call it durability testing to make sure that they can they hold together when you're in some surf. But that was like probably not super fun,
Yep.
but it was like the payoff was worth it. Definitely have one where like it was a bigger day riding on the outside, and like I was starting to figure it all out, and then I went down, got separated from the parawing, and this wave like it just sucked the parawing down,
Mm.
and like I
Mm.
couldn't find it. So now I'm out there swimming with my board, like trying to hold everything together and find this parawing. I find it, and it's stuck maybe like 6 or 7 feet underwater. So
Jeez.
like the whitewater sucked it down. The bar was floating, but the canopy was full of water. So it was like this
Mm-hmm.
underwater, and I couldn't reach it. So now I'm like in the waves, getting worked, trying to figure out like how do I get to this thing. I tried to dive down, and like my leash was like getting taut, and
Mm.
then like waves are still coming in. So I'm like, man, what am I going to do? So I ended up taking my leash off. I held onto it with one hand. I dived down as far as I could, and I was able to like just grab the bar. So now I'm like stretched like this underwater, holding my board
What a
here, the
mess.
parawing down here, and I'm like trying to pull it up, but it's full of water. So it's like pulling a trash bag full of water through, to get it up, and that wasn't
Mm.
happening. So I ended up like just I had to come back up for air again, go back down, and then I just like fed one line through my hand to get to the leading edge. So I kind of just
Hmm.
hold it up like this underwater. Once I got a hold of that leading edge, then I could swim it up to the surface, and like everything was fine. But it was kind of just this like having to troubleshoot while it's like, 6 foot waves just pounding and you're getting cleaned up, and like trying to not
Jeez.
get pushed too far in or out to stay where the parawing is. Like, yeah, that was probably one of the like gnarlier things, but it's all part of paying dues and figuring it out. I learned real quick that like don't do that.
How did the Parawing survive well?
Yeah, it's still in one piece. Like I've kind of
It's
beat the
good.
crap out of these things, and they've I haven't had one blow up on me yet. So
Mm.
that means my next sessions it's gonna fall apart. That's how it goes, right?
It'll
But
explode in
no,
your
I've
hand.
I've put all of these wings that I have through like a pretty, I call it substantial durability test. Like I've lost them in waves. I've intentionally flung them into whitewater to see what's going to happen.
Mm.
And I haven't had one break on me yet, which is like pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think they're really standing the durability test here in Australia as well. Like I haven't heard an issue yet, but I spoke with Sinbad and she said that someone had a like they got caught in a wave or something and it just totally destroyed the parawing. I guess it's kind of luck as well. But I think
Yeah,
that's go ahead.
totally. Like it, I think there's a lot of variables that happen when you go down in a wave that like, if you, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. And I think a lot of it, I've just kind of gotten lucky. So that once that luck runs out, then I'll have a nice shred of canvas to swim in one day. But yeah,
Mm,
until then.
it'll happen, man. Do you use any safety gear that's worth talking about? I think it's always nice for us to touch on it, just so people don't do stupid stuff out there, and then
Totally.
we're guilty for it.
So I like for riding waves, I kind of look at, my body is the ultimate piece of safety gear. Like just making sure that I'm physically fit,
Mm,
conditioned, capable of swimming in whatever the conditions are that I'm out in. Like that's, I think, the first and foremost thing. I also started like last summer, downwinding, I took a mast to the head and got like 6 or 7 stitches. Yeah, that was like
damn.
really suboptimal because I'm like way out at the top of the run, like everyone's gone. I'm kind of by myself, and now I have this like head wound. I'm just bleeding all over the place. So it was like
Jeez.
my only choice was to basically finish the downwind run and like hope I don't pass out. So
Mm,
that was like I wouldn't say like a wake up call, but kind of just a reassessment of like what am I doing?
hmm.
Like how do I mitigate that? So I started like I always wear a helmet now or a bump cap, something to just protect your head.
Hmm.
For downwinding, like we always wear a PFD, have a phone, I carry water, kind of just general communication stuff like that. Because things just happen, that's an inevitable. Um, and staying in touch with whoever you go with. Like I've had, downwind runs where I break a paddle and it's like, now I'm going to swim for, 3 hours. So you just hop on the group chat and I share my location and say, hey, broke my paddle. I'm
Hmm.
swimming to here. So people can see where I'm at. And if they, want to come find me, which they never do,
You'll be all right.
at least like,
Steve, you'll
yeah,
be fine.
he's good. He'll make it in eventually. Um, just like having communication is huge. And then, in the waves, if it gets to a point where like you aren't comfortable, making sure you have layers of safety involved, whether that's having someone doing safety in the lineup or
Mm,
having someone watching for you. Like there's just every day is different, every wave is different, every situation is different. There isn't a blanket approach, but I think that having layers of safety is super important. And then not only that, but knowing how to use all of your safety gear,
yeah.
knowing like if you carry a tourniquet, do you know how to put it on? Like how do
Mm,
you get to it? If you carry an EPIRB, have you popped it?
hmm.
Does your phone work in its phone pouch? Can you use your watch when it's wet? Like
Yeah.
little things like that, just because you carry it doesn't mean it's going to help you. Like you still have to interact with it.
Hmm.
So, but at the end of the day, yeah, just having layers of safety, practicing with your equipment and making sure that, if something happens, you know what you're going to do and have a plan and just staying calm regardless of whatever's going on.
Yeah, and I think that's where, being out there, being a waterman like you are and experiencing the ocean and being okay being out there. There's some days that there was one time that I was trying to cross the bay from the north to the south and it's like a 40K run and the wind died. I was on the wing back then and the wind died midway through. And it took me 3.5 hours to paddle, a 50 by 24 board to shore. And you just remain calm, because anybody else can panic in those situations, and then you're just in a world of trouble, man.
Totally.
Where do you see parawinging going in 2025? What's your forecast for this year for parawinging?
Um, I think obviously downwinding is kind of the next big thing. Downwinding is going to get really popular. People pushing that sport and growing with it, and then just more people getting into wave riding. I think for the Southern Hemisphere, it's coming into the wave riding season, so that's going to be a huge there's going to be the Aussie guys are going to be pushing the sport now. It's kind of time to pass the baton, and
Yeah.
really excited to see what they're doing. So yeah, I think the sport's just going to continue to blow up, continue to grow, and we're just going to keep getting better gear, better riders, new stuff, and people are going to be pushing the bar with freestyle, and
Mm.
it's a new sport. Kind of the field's wide open right now.
Yeah. Do you have any travels planned for this year that you're going to be
Nothing too
going to?
crazy. Just the summer races, Maui to Molokai, Molokai to Oahu. But that's really it. Hanging around here.
Nice.
Yeah,
Is there anything that you want to add to this conversation, Steve, that we haven't touched on, man? That was an epic chat.
man. I feel like we touched on all of it. Just thanks for having me on. Super stoked to chat, and looking forward to seeing how everyone shakes out.
Yeah, dude, thanks for coming on. I've been blown away by like everybody just being so open and receptive, and like nobody knows who the hell I am. They're like, "Yep, but we'll have a chat, man. That's cool." So
Yeah,
it's
man.
really refreshing because we hear that all the time, and I'm experiencing it now with trying to reach out to certain people, and it's awesome, man. So thanks for being open,
Totally, totally. Thanks for having me. It
and
was super fun.
yeah, keep the stoke alive there during summer.
All right.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, man. Thank you.